What's up, all Power Addict crew? Today we're doing rear brakes on a 2011 JKU. Let's get it. And once you get it all safely jacked up, sitting on jack stands, the first thing you need to do, get these bolts out. This removes the caliper from the caliper bracket, 13mm. You got one here, one there. Now every now and then, whenever you're taking out this bolt, you see the slider pin, it's wanting to turn as well. So just get your wrench. It won't take much. Stick it right there to hold it in place. And take your bolt on out. Take your pry bar or screwdriver or something, just wedge out on the caliper like that. And you can't see. You can zoom back a little bit. Then you get down here, just wedge it back and forth, and it'll walk that caliper right on off. Don't let it hang by the hose, okay? Set it up here out of the way. Now you can take these off right here if you want, or you can leave them on the bracket, because we're going to take the bracket off next, which is right back here, the bolts are. And we got something building a critter nest here. But we ain't gonna worry about that right now. Now the two bigger bolts that I mentioned, one's right there, the socket's already on, it's 18mm. Come down here, got another one. Oh, where's that? Right there. Take them both out, because that removes the bracket here. Now be careful taking that bolt out, because if you got your socket and the ratchet stuck in there, you take the bolt out too far, you're going to be up against that link bar for the sway bar, and it's going to be a little difficult getting it out of there. So just get it to her hand tight, or hand loose, whatever, and back it on out. Now at this point you can grab your rotor hat, give it a little wiggle and walk it right on off. Now under normal circumstances, after you get your brake rotor off and all that stuff out of the way, this is where you put the new rotor on and put the new pads and put your caliper back on. But you know what we're doing today? Everything. So we gotta get this caliper off. So word of advice for everyone, if you're in a situation to where you feel like you've got a brake sticking, meaning that if you press on the brake, the fluid gets forced through this line right here toward the caliper squeezes the brake rotor and makes you stop. Cool, no problem. But sometimes you get a caliper that's sticking, which means that piston right there isn't retracting back inside the cavity here like it should, which means it's sticking outward. It's keeping that squeeze on that rotor all the time. That's a bad thing. Now, what most people end up doing, which I do not 100% agree with, is just going ahead and replacing the caliper. And the reason I say I don't agree with that is that not all the time is it just the caliper, or is it even the caliper itself. Oftentimes this soft line right here that goes up to the body, the chassis, that soft line gets deteriorated on the inside and starts acting like a check valve inside. As the inside of this hose falls apart, it starts getting little flaps inside of it, so to speak. So you press on the brakes, the fluid goes this way into the caliper to make you stop. Then when the fluid tries to retract back, if the inside of this hose is falling apart, it'll drip, the little flaps inside of it, deterioration will drop down. It'll stop, it'll impede the flow of the fluid going back into the line and going back to your master cylinder. So if you go to replace a caliper because you've got one of your brakes are sticking, go ahead and replace the soft line. Save yourself some headache. On my little YJ right there, when I first got it, I had one of the brake calipers were sticking on it, and I cheaped out and just replaced the caliper itself on the front. And man, I didn't go probably 3 or 4 miles, and I hit the brakes again, and that one caliper would not release. I'm like, duh, I should have changed that soft line. As soon as I changed that soft line, I was good. Now, does that mean I could have just changed the soft line first and everything been good? Well, yeah, possible. But here's the caveat to that. Oftentimes when you get that deterioration inside your hoses, brake fluid is hydroscopic, which means it will absorb water. If you get the breakdown of inside your hoses and stuff, oftentimes the seals inside your calipers here are breaking down as well. So again, if you're going to replace a hose, replace the caliper with it. If you're going to replace the caliper, replace the hose with it. Save yourself some headache, people. Come on. I know it's a little bit of extra money, but come on, this is your safety, so just do it. It ain't that bad. So since I'm replacing caliper, soft line and all, right there is the fitting. We need to break that loose. Leave it attached to the body if you can. This is what you call a line wrench or a flare nut wrench. You see how it grabs hold of the nut on all these sides right here and just got a gap big enough to get inside where the line is. And so what we're going to try to do is break this right here loose, and hopefully it's going to cooperate. Oftentimes what happens, this is a 2011 model, so hopefully it shouldn't be too problematic, is that you break this nut right here loose and just back it off and you're good. But sometimes you get it where it'll stick to the line right here. Then you have to take the line loose and unscrew the line from the, you have to take the soft line loose to unscrew from this. Or sometimes you just don't want to break loose at all and you end up twisting something in two or stripping this out. So we're going to see which way this goes. I'll be back with you in a minute. I'll let you know. So get your line wrench positioned to where you can get it broken loose. And this is going to be a little bit cranky because this bracket is kind of in the way. So what I'm hoping is leaving it mounted will hold it steady enough that I can get this broken loose, and then I'll, whoops, wrong end. Then I'll take it on off and take it the rest of the way off. And so like I said, I'm using a 12mm flare nut wrench. I think I got lucky. Take your hose. Here's the end going to the solid line, the steel line. Feed it up through here. Pull your steel line down just enough where it clears the frame, and go ahead and get your thread started. Okay, screw it up on there. Now another thing you want to check, it doesn't matter if you've got this extended bracket or if it's a factory mount right here, it does not matter. Check your brake line. Oftentimes when you take your hard line off your flex line, it may flex, tweak, whatever, your line a little bit. Look in between here. You do not want this hard line touching your frame anywhere throughout here, okay? Nowhere. Because what happens is, going down the road, this line will be vibrating, whatever. If it's rubbing against your frame anywhere through here, it's going to rub a hole in it. So be sure you can get your finger behind it a little bit, pull out, tug on it a little bit. Just make sure you got a good solid gap between all that. No rubbing. Now before you slide your rotor on, be sure to get you some brake clean up all the surfaces, get all that oil residue off, because manufacturers will coat these in a protective fluid, oil, whatever, that will prevent it from rust and stuff. So once you get that done, then you come up to your axle here, rub you a little bit of anti-seize around this post right here. This will help prevent later on, when you try to get that off, it won't be so daggone difficult. That's it. You don't need a whole lot, just rub a little bit in there. And the previous owner used a silver anti-seize, which is good stuff. I tend to use the gold, the copper coat. So just rub a little bit around that edge right through there, because most of the time that's where it sticks at. Line your rotor head up, ta-da, push it on. Now oftentimes when you buy new calipers, you got your caliper, then you got your bracket. The bracket on these rigs right here, you get the bracket along with, it's all a kit. Along with that kit, you'll also get new hardware that bolts the caliper to the bracket. Here are the bolts that holds the bracket to back here. I've already got the brake shoes set up inside the bracket, because that way I can just take the bracket, slide it all on here at one time. It's a little easier to deal with that way. Your little chatter springs here, make sure they're in properly, meaning properly inserted. You got that little silver tab right there, and right there. Then you got the spring side here on the outside. You don't want this right here on the inside, because why? You ain't got room. It'll hit your rotor. Don't do that. So you can see right here, the springy tab outside. Speaking of tabs, we got your little tab here. So what that does, it sticks out at a predetermined level on your brake pads here. So whenever your brake pads get worn to a certain point, your brake disc on the back side here will rub on the end of that right there and make a terrible, terrible sound. Therefore telling you, yo, time to get new brakes. So, yep, make sure you got that installed properly. So at this point, you take your bracket. Like I said, I've already got my shoes inserted here. They'll slide right over the disc here. Work it in there. And, oh, I almost dropped it. Get up here. Get that one started. Get in here. Right there, and get that one started. Now this bottom one right here, you can use a wrench or you can use a ratchet, either one. But if you use a ratchet, you're going to have to run it in for a little bit by hand before you're going to fit the head of the ratchet inside there, even if you're using a 3/8 ratchet. So, let's see if I've got it run in there further enough yet. No, I do not. There we go. And just tighten them both up. And once you get your two 18mm bolts tightened up, I had a little bit of separation here at my brake pads, which allows me to slide the bracket in place. So take your brake pads, squeeze them together, contacting the surface of the rotor, because why? That's going to allow this to go on easy. Now take your brake caliper, slide it over like this right here. You may have to push in these slider pins. You may have to nudge them in a little bit, which is pretty common. Take your bolt, drop one of them. Hopefully it don't fall into the dark abyss and never be seen again. I found it. Get those threaded on. That 13mm, tighten them up. So before we hook up our soft line, which goes right there, let's talk about this caliper for a moment. You can actually put a caliper on wrong, meaning here's your bleeder screw. Down here is your soft line where your brake line hooks in at. Why does that matter? Because you've got to bleed your brakes when you're done. So you need your bleeder screw here above your soft line here. So whenever you crack this right here loose, and your bubbles rise. So as your bubbles float to the top, it'll come out your bleeder screw here. If you've got the wrong caliper on the wrong side, your bleeder screw will be below your soft line. So then all your bubbles will stay up at the top of the caliper here, and you won't be able to bleed it off. So make sure your bleeder screw is above your soft line, okay? Bleeder screw on top. You know, obviously I was getting really repetitive right there, but you would not believe how common that is. People putting the caliper on wrong and having the bleeder screw on the bottom. They cannot figure out why. I can't bleed my brakes. Bubbles go up, so that's where your bleeder screw needs to be. Cool. Now let's talk about the banjo bolt. What it does, whenever you press on the brakes, it forces fluid through the hole right there. It forces fluid out that hole and then into your caliper. So you step on the brakes, it comes through the brake line forces it through this hole right here, it comes out that hole right there and into your caliper. We're clear? Clear. Cool. But there's one little detail. These little washers right here, these are called crush washers. What you want to do is put them on here. You got one that goes on here. You take your soft line, then your banjo bolt comes through that. You take your next crush washer, put it in place here like that. Because look, we got crush washer, then screw it into the caliper. What that crush washer does, whenever you go to tighten up the bolt and you get it good and tight, it crushes and fills up all the imperfections in the caliper, in the bolt, and in the hose. Provides a really good seal, because brake systems are under a lot of pressure. Then once you get that in place, 11mm, tighten it up. Yeah, I can see it in the comments now. You done forgot to do something. You forgot to change the Mercy brake shoes. Guess what? You don't have to do it every single time. The Mercy brake shoes got so little wear on them. More times than not, the Mercy brake shoes will last a long time. So if you're tight on a budget, you don't have to change them out. Does it hurt to change them every time you do brake pads? Of course not. But the thing with it is, your Mercy brake really doesn't have that much to ride. I mean, it doesn't do much. I mean, honestly, it's for emergency brake. Whenever you're sitting still, you pull the e-brake, it sits still. Versus your brake pads, when you go down the road and caliper squeezing on the rotor, you're getting a constant wear that way. So am I going to change the e-brakes? Yes, I'm going to, but I've got a reason why, and that's going to be in a separate video. And I'll show you guys then. Alright, Power Addicts crew, this is where you got to bleed the air out of the caliper. Now, I'm not going to include that in this video. What I'm going to do is do a pop-up here somewhere to I can take you to a video to where I did a one-man bleeding system. I just used a Gatorade bottle, a vinyl tubing, and just did it all by myself. It was pretty easy, actually. And also, I'll include a link to where we did the front brake on this thing, and I'll chop the link, make us pick up where we started doing the bleeding on the front caliper on this thing. Okay, cool. So everyone, if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, leave me some cool comments down below it. Oh yeah, I've got a few more videos coming up on this JK. I'm working on this for a friend of mine, and once I get it taken care of, we're going to get back on some of my projects. Maybe a little work on my 91 here. Let's see. Oh yeah, the camper build for the Cherokee. Got that coming up. And I'm going to try to get some more time on the rust bucket. I need my toy up and going. So everyone, stay tuned. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace out. Later, y'all.